All right, welcome to Lou's Demos or How-Tos. So we're going to be using Proximon 9.2 to install Rocky 10.0. So here you can see I already have the ISO downloaded. If not, you would have to go to Google Rocky and download the ISO and upload it into your Proximon. As long as you have an ISO folder, you would just click Upload, select, grab the file, and upload it. Once it's finished uploading, you can then start the process. So we're going to go under our server, right click, go to create VM, and then here we're going to give it our name. So I'm going to call it demo Nessus because that's what I'm going to eventually put on here. So there we go. So each VM has to have a unique ID number. So if you get a mirror message because multiple people are using your Proximon or not. And then we're going to go to our OS. We're going to drop down to our ISO, and then we're going to look for our Rocky 10. So we have the minimum, we have the full version. So we're going to go with the minimum because we don't need much with that. So then here we're going to set up Linux, our kernel type. You can see we have two choices there. We're going to go under System. Here we can change a few things. We can change the BIOS. If we're going to add a MQ agent or add a TPM to it, we can do that. But if we're not going to, we can just leave that alone. And then here we're going to go to disk. And then if we have multiple disk storage, then we would click down and download the appropriate or move to the appropriate disk that we want to use. So here I'm going to use my Z-RAID. And here, instead of using 50, I'm going to go to 60 because I'm going to be able to store some data and stuff like that on here. So I'll have more plans. Go to CPU. So I'm going to bump this up to 4 cores. And then I'm going to go to RAM. And then I'm going to go here and put 496 or vice versa, 248, because I wanted to have at least a minimum 2 gigs, and then I wanted to be able to go up to 4 gigs. So then here I'm just going to change this. So we have our minimum, our maximum. And then if we had multiple network cards, we would pick all those different choices. And then if we had multiple VLANs, we would add the VLANs in there. And then here's a little summary. We're going to click finished. And then we're going to wait for our VM to come up. So right now it's being created. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and double click it and then click start. And now we can start the process. Now we can see the process of it going. And then we're going to arrow up. Some VMs, when you're doing this, you don't want to do the test media because it ejects the CD to create the next CD. And that necessarily work pretty good because it's a virtual CD, so it may kick it out. So we're going to go with install Rocky. So now we're just waiting for it to boot up. All right, welcome to Lou's Demos or How-Tos. So today we're going to be talking about using Proximon to install Rocky version 10 as a virtual. So a couple things you will need. A, you're going to need a machine that runs Proximon or an individual machine. The steps will work pretty much similar. And you need a copy of Rocky 10. So you can go to Google and Google Rocky's website and download the ISO. So here's how we get started. We're going to go to our first server. We're going to right click, create new VM. And then I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it demo. And then I'm going to call it Nessus. because I'm going to install Nessus on it afterwards. So we're going to go to our OS. We're going to drop down and we're going to look for our ISO. So there we go. So since we're using Linux, we're going to use the default there. So we're going to go to System, leave the default. We're going to drop down here. And I've been having some problems, so I'm going to stick with IDE. And then here, I'm going to bump this up to 65 gigabytes. Then I'm going to go to CPU, and I'm going to bump this up to 4. And then down here, I'm going to drop down to host. I haven't really figured out too many of these virtual settings yet to work. So we're going to go host. We're going to go with 4096, 4 gigs of RAM. In this particular case, because if I want to run Nessus and run a couple machines, it's nice to have the power. And then here, since we have no additional networking functionality, just the default basic, so we're going to just hit next. Here's our summary. And then once our machine is now created, so we can see here's the process of it's creating the shell. And we're going to go ahead and double click on it to launch it, and then click start. And then here, we're going to arrow up to do the install. We don't want to do the test media. And then here we go. We can see that the OS is starting to do the install process. All right, we can still see that it's still loading now, because also, depending on the version of Linux, if to get the graphical interface, you have to do over 2 gigs of RAM. If you do 2 or less, you probably will get the command line look instead. All right, so we're going to go here, and I'm going to move my taskbar. So I'm going to go to the task settings, and I'm going to go in here and change the behavior. So I'm going to do auto hide, because for some reason the resolution, I'm having an issue hitting the continue button. So if you run into that problem, you can do the same thing. All right, so we got 1, 2, 3 things that we need to take care of. So we're going to go here. I'm going to leave it the default. I'm going to let it partition automatically. So it's going to do that. And then we're going to go under networking. And then we need to give it a name. So I'm going to call it Nessus. That's what I plan on doing. And here we can see a couple of good things. We can see here's our IP address we're going to have. So that's good. So we know that the internet phone book, we know the DHCP and all that's working. So we're going to hit done. We're going to go in here. I'm going to hit enabled. And then I'm going to put in a password for the machine. And then I'm going to allow SSH. Now, if I was putting this in like real production, yeah, I wouldn't do that. So I'm going to hit next. And this is going to say, hey, we're sure we want to do that anyways. And then we're going to hit begin. And then this is going to do the install. And now we're going to go ahead and click reboot. And now we see the machine is rebooting. Then we're going to log in. Now I'm going to do yum update -y. So this will be up to date. So this is now reading the repositories and found all the updates, and now it's deploying the updates. Alright, once this finishes being updated, this concludes this part of the video of how to set up and do a basic install of Linux. Thank you.